Welcome back to the shop today. I do appreciate you watching. Please like, share, and subscribe as my normal pitch goes. I still want to grow this page. Today I am doing winch work, which is kind of buggy adjacent. I'm not really actually working on the buggy. I'm just doing some winches today. Now, why do I have two winches here is because I have two places I want to winch. Now, usually on these buggies, you just put a winch on the front for recovery and suck down purposes. On the rear, most of these buggies just have a suck down winch, a lightweight winch in order to pull the rear axle up and down and get it closer to the chassis. I decided, since you're taking up all that room anyway, why not put a winch that will be good for recovery as well? So, when I was out looking for used worn M8000 winches, I was looking for two of them. Since we're talking about going out and buying some garbage winches and making some stuff for the old buggy, if you go out and buy a used winch and it doesn't have a control box on it, if you want to test to see if the thing works, get a battery, hook your ground wire to the ground of the motor. You've got an F1 post, an F2 post, and an armature. This is your two fields in your armature. All you have to do is hook a battery plus to one of your fields, and then jump your F2 to the armature, and the motor will spin one way. If you want it to spin the other way, put your positive and then jump your F2. Okay, I've got the solenoid box disconnected, and I have hooked my battery cable positive up to the F1 terminal, and I have my negative hooked up to the ground on the winch motor. Now, this is a good way of testing the motors as such. Now, if I want the motor to go the opposite direction, I will connect this battery cable to the F2 post, and I will jump the A and the F1 post. Once you know that the winch motor works, I pull the cable off and get it ready for some disassembly. Answers that. Two for two. One of them came out. So we've got the motor off on this half for now. I would not disassemble this because if you pull this cap off and let stuff fall apart, your brushes will come out and then it's a pain in the butt. I'm going to take this apart right before final assembly, right before I throw some new paint on it, and just clean it up. But other than that, you don't have to really take that apart for this process. Now, keep in mind this has it's kind of like a bearing, but it's a thrust. So that goes in on one side. The brake hub. Like the brake's just on, so you turn it. It'll come right out. Looks like the corners on this particular shoe broke. I'll see what I can do about that. And there's the other shoe. Then there's your drive gear. Planetaries are in here. And then you've got another thrust bearing assembly. So this I really don't have to do anything with. What I am going to do is clean it up and re-grease everything. So for now, I'm going to leave these alone. Voila. Okay, so what I will have to cut, I need to take 4 inches out of this rod. I need to take 4 inches out of the drum. Now on the drum, the brake ride's over here, so if I take the 4 inches out of this side and weld it together, probably better off. If I narrow it on this side, the drum surface stays fully intact. So I'm going to do that. I like that. I start by measuring in several places around the drum where I want to cut. Then I wrap a piece of tape on my cut line, and then make sure to mark which side of that tape you're going to cut. Now I'll cut one side of the drum, and then I will stop and cut the other side of the drum, and then cut the last little bit out at the end. That way I can keep it as straight as I can. But keep in mind, this doesn't have to be within thousandths of exact. These drums aren't that precise to begin with. You wonder, I cut this with a cutoff wheel, which is not as precise as a bandsaw, obviously. But I've taken this piece of pipe and I've run a couple rungs of tape around it so it really slides together tight. And that'll hold the drum square while I weld it. So even if there's some gaps here and there, that'll be okay. I am going to chamfer these edges so that I get a good weld. Once it's spot welded really well, I'll pull the tube out because I really don't want to weld this tube inside. I still need the brake and things to go inside. Bring you in close here. Tube's holding everything together. I do take some time with the square to make sure it is as close to no run out as I can. And I'll do this again after I tack weld it too. We got her here. Don't want to weld that in. Where I come around, I actually went over the existing weld that I spotted it in. But it penetrated well. They're nice clean welds. You can see on the edges of the drum it was welded together anyway. So if you're not a good welder, you may not want to do this, but I'm confident in these welds. I'm not even going to grind them down. I'm just going to run the rope right over it. Next, knock the 4 inches out of the brake shaft. Got my gear drive in, got my shortened shaft in, set the drum in. Now, I'm not going to put the brake shoes in yet because I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. Just out of curiosity, 6 inches on the money, bolt hole to bolt hole. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this on the winch tray, snug down these bolts, then I'm going to worry about that mess. I think I'll be able to just cut the ends off it and re-tap it. But for now, I'm going to set this in. Now I can get my crossbars ready to cut. Do the same thing. I take 4 inches out, and I took out 4 inches that are the ugliest part so that I can re-thread in here. Little piece of advice, mark the piece you want to cut. For instance, on this one, I marked it and I need to cut to the outside here and the inside here. That way you don't end up with one a little too short. And just to make sure you get it at the right place, now that these are cut, spray a little silicone in them. I'm re-threading them 5/16 just like the original were. Right now I'm just going to get kind of everything cleaned up and ready to paint. Now I peeled all the stickers off, and I will just glue those back on when the time comes. And then I remove the bolts that hold the engagement side and gear side together. That way I don't have to worry about putting them back together since there's nothing wrong with them. And I'll take those 2 bolts out later, clean them, and then I put these bolts back in. Get a couple coats on this, so that'll look pretty good. And I'll do the drum in silver, so it'll just be a little different. And there's the drum. Got everything all painted. Now, you really don't have to take the motor off of this at this point. There's really nothing I need to do here. But if you do take it apart, you got to kind of be careful, because if you pull this off, the brushes will pop out. So you got to kind of keep everything contained. So I really don't want to take this apart. If you pull this piece out, the brushes will come out. You can pull this cover off separately, but I know the motor works, so there's no need to do that. All I want to do in here is put a little bit of grease on the thrust washers and just spray in here with a little bit of silicone to help keep water out. And remember these little thrust deals. This is where I want to start kind of getting some grease on everything. And this has a keyway in it. That's it. I also put a small amount of grease around the contact area between the motor housing and the face bearing housing, just to help keep water out. So this also has a pin keyway here to line up. I like putting a little bit of grease on bolt threads, they have a little bit better tendency to not corrode if you keep moisture off of them. I taped the surfaces that I really didn't want to paint, which are the surfaces that ride on that thrust. Apparently I taped them well because there we go. So this surface area mates into that surface area. We've got grease on all the teeth of the gear. I think I will also just put a very light coat on this end, just in case I miss something. Now, you don't want to put grease inside the drum. Don't forget that is where your brake sits. Test the clutch, or the brake, or the coil. There we go. So, like I said, there's no grease that goes on this. The trick on this part here is holding all your shoes in place while you drop it in. And if you turn your brake, it'll release them. And turn it a little bit, make sure it drops in all the way. Voila. We'll put a little grease in this piece because it does have some frictional ability, but you don't want to go overboard. Just a very, very, very thin coat. Turn it, make sure it's fully seated. Now, I can turn the motor over and drop it. Again, I also want to put just a little bit of grease on the ends of these splines. Yeah. And that's ready to go. I did break down and went down and bought some new 5/16 bolts. Couple things I recommend on these: a little bit of grease and a lock washer. Grease on these so they don't do what the old ones did, and that's seize up inside. And then a lock washer to keep them from backing out if you have one. If you don't have one, just snug them up and don't over torque them. We'll go see if I got some washers for them. Last step is I'm putting in the cross brace in here. Now when I threaded these holes into the tube, make sure they're long enough for the bolts that you get. I would have gotten one size smaller in bolt, but they didn't have that size, so I made sure I went deep enough. And the other thing I did I took the wire wheel and I just wire wheeled them. Now these were like chrome, they were polished up so nice, but there were also some gouges in it. Since I'm going to run a synthetic rope, I would much rather have just some brush. And I'm only running these in right now. Reason being, I want to set the base on something pretty flat. Before I fully tighten them. Cool, one narrow drum winch. Okay, now for the release. I need this reclocked, so I'm going to go ahead and pull this side apart and rotate it. It's not that big a deal, really. That's kind of why they make them round. So leave one bolt. I get it clocked where I want it. If you pull this apart, this gear assembly can come undone. It's just a pain in the butt, so if you don't have to pull that apart, don't. And since all I'm doing is clocking this, I see no reason. Oh, that's smooth. Gotta like that. We'll run this over the bench real quick and test it, make sure it works correctly. I was able to peel off all the stickers. Now, I don't know if they'll stay, but if they don't, I can glue them. Definitely have to glue these, but that's where they go. I'll get the glue for them, or I'll just order new stickers, but that'll make it look very finished. Now my narrow fairlead will work. I'll bolt holes line up. And the drum turns smooth. I want to test the motor, make sure I'm really not wasting a bunch of time. I don't want to wire in a controller because I don't have a vehicle to ground it on. So to test a winch motor, you've got your F1, F2, and your A post. Hook your battery cable to one of your F posts and jump your A and your F2 and it'll spin one direction. Then if you put your positive on the other post, it'll spin the other direction if the motor's good. I now know I have a good winch. I drew most of this because I don't want to draw it on video. It takes too long and no one wants to watch me do that for that long. So this is the solenoid that I'm using for these winches. Now, I got away from the traditional 4 solenoid, multiple big box. These are really easy to use, really easy to wire, obviously a small package. Doing a full-size winch though, make sure you get one that is amp rated. This one's rated at 1700 amps, way more than I need for a normal winch. Most of these, however, are made for the ATV winches. So when you order a control solenoid, make sure it is amp rated high enough for what you're doing. So, this is a solenoid, this is your winch motor, battery, and your momentary switch. Now your momentary switch is a 6-pin switch on the back, remember. So you've got your F1, your F2, your armature, and your ground. Now make sure your motor is grounded. You will need to make sure your switch is grounded. your center pole and your controller is grounded, and then of course your battery ground. Now your battery, your positive will go to a positive post, which this one happens to be marked. Some of them aren't marked very well. And your negative. Now, negative on this solenoid does not mean battery negative. It means it's field negative for your motor. And then these two here, or your armature I should say, are what go to your F1 and your F2 posts. Now, your F1 is usually color-coded with a yellow cable, if you happen to have one of those, and your F2 is usually color-coded with blue. It doesn't really matter. So, if your F2 and your F1 and your armature are all wired, that's all nice, easy, and simple. If you mix those up, all it does is make your switch go your opposite on the switch. So if you happen to mix those up, it's not going to make any difference at all, other than you have to compensate the direction of the motor with your switch. This just reverses the polarity in the field of the motor and reverses the motor. The switch, again, I will review this because this is where people get kind of mixed up. You've got your battery. Fuse your positive to the middle pole, run your middle pole on the other side of the switch to your negative. You run one of your connectors from your controller to a corner. You run your second wire from your controller to the corner. And then remember, on that other buggy, we do the same thing. We jump wire your opposite corners. That way, when you flip the switch, it flips the polarity, go into the field, and triggers the motor accordingly. That will give you the dash switch, the controller, motor. It'll all work for you. I just want to throw this up there in case you hadn't seen this before. If you need a little more professionally done diagram, they are all over the internet, so they're not hard to find. Now, I've got this winch wired with the solenoid on it, just so you can kind of see how it goes together. And I did this when I fit the winch on the bracket, made sure I knew where this was going to mount. This will mount to the chassis. Now, the center terminal is the ground terminal, and then these two are your direction poles. On the main battery post, this post right here will go directly to your battery. These two posts on the outside will go to your F1 and your F2 positions. Your third pole for your armature will come down here to, it says negative on this box, but like I said, ignore that. It's not ground negative, it's field negative in your motor. And that has to be there to change its direction on when the motor goes different ways. We'll get to this part of it when I do the plumbing and wiring, but you can see these are short pigtailed. They are also heavy cable. You want to run heavy enough to hold the amperage and not have voltage drop. Voltage drop, by the way, will burn up your motors fairly quick. Okay, there's onward. My winch modifications. Thanks a lot for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Throw some questions in the comments if you have them. These weren't full rebuilds. They were just narrowing them down. So thanks again for watching. Now for some more G-beam. Saw Sean hit it.
Yeah.
And of course, ended up with some trail repair today. Had to weld the cap in place for an axle U-joint. We were able to catch it before it blew the joint completely out, but we had to tap the cap back in and there were no retainers for it. So we literally spot welded the cap into the axle itself. Twisted to drive mine.
Winch myself all the way out.
Not a dark things.
What did you have before this?
It was a 4 3/4.
Coming up.
Passenger.
It's coming up.
Stay this way.
Right. Now go to the right. Oh. Yeah. That was a nice climb. there's the line. That was my next thought there. And there you go.
You got air.
It's down now. Beautiful. That was a great climb. Go way to the right, though, as you go down. There you go. You're good there, yeah. Just turn it that way. Let it slide. There you go. Nice. This is the Z turn. He's never been in on it. We'll see how he does. Left front tire is going to come off the ground and help pivot him around. And then it'll come back down. You can drive right out of it. Beautiful. to lift a tire. I like this particular view. You've got a great off-road trail in the desert with a lake behind you, mountain peaks in the background with snow on them.